Happy St. George's Day, ladies and gentlemen. On this day, on this channel, we celebrate England's patron saint by examining English art. This year we shall be doing a short review of John Milton's Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is an epic blank verse poem, which tells the story of the fall of mankind, as famously depicted in Genesis. A blank verse poem is one where the verses do not rhyme. The author, John Milton, was an English poet, essayist, scholar, and polyglot. In his younger years, he travelled Europe and enjoyed the intellectual and cultural scene of Rome. Before and during the English Civil War, Milton gained fame and notoriety for writing religious and political tracts in support of Puritan Protestant Christianity, republicanism, and tracts against the reign of King Charles I. After the parliamentarians defeated the royalists, executed Charles I, and turned the kingdom into a republic, Milton was appointed Secretary for Foreign Tongues in 1649. He served the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell, and only abandoned government when King Charles II returned and the Restoration happened after Cromwell's death. A warrant was written for Milton's arrest by the new regime, and he spent some time in jail, but he was quickly pardoned. He is most famous for writing Paradise Lost, which we shall now discuss. This will be a short video because Paradise Lost is a massive poem, and is a deep well of ideas, poetry, symbolism, and theology that you could easily drown in, trying to analyse just one facet of the epic. For the purposes of this review, I shall be keeping the average reader in mind, and not poets, theologians, or writers. A big question many people have when someone mentions Paradise Lost is whether they should try reading it. Esteemed epic literature from centuries past, such as Paradise Lost, can seem daunting after all. If you are a Christian, especially Protestant, if you are English, if you have enjoyed epics such as the Iliad and the Odyssey, and if you enjoy poetry and poets such as Blake, and of course the Bard, William Shakespeare, then I can heartily recommend reading Paradise Lost. However, even if you aren't any of those things, I can still recommend reading it, because of what I believe are the three strongest features of the epic. Paradise Lost does many different things, but there are three which I think are distinctly important and responsible for its lofty position in English literature. The first is the depiction of the world before the fall, the second is its depiction of Satan, and the third is the beauty and style of its verse. The first of these two are largely a work of imagination on Milton's part. Anyone who has read the Bible knows that details on the world's condition before the fall are few and far between, and that Satan doesn't appear too often, and his motivations are always implied rather than explicitated. Paradise Lost provides some imaginative speculation on what the world was like before the fall, and some theories on Satan's motivations. The world before the fall. In Book 4 of Paradise Lost, Satan disguises himself as a cherub to sneak past the angelic guard into Eden, and discovers the paradise beyond the walls. Beneath him with new wonder now he views, to all delight of human sense exposed, in narrow room, nature's whole wealth, yea more, a heaven on earth, for blissful paradise of God the garden was, by him in the east, of Eden planted. Eden stretched her line, from Arion eastward to the royal towers of great Seleucia, built by Grecian kings, or where the sons of Eden long before dwelt in Telsara. In this pleasant soil, his far more pleasant garden God ordained. Out of the fertile ground he caused to grow all trees of noblest kind, for sight, smell, taste, and all amid them stood the tree of life, high eminent, blooming ambrosial fruit, of vegetable gold, and next to life, our death, the tree of knowledge, grew fast by, knowledge of good bought dear by knowing ill. Southward through Eden went a river large, nor changed his course but through the shaggy hill, passed underneath engulfed, for God hath thrown that mountain, as his garden mound high raised, upon the rapid current which through veins of purporous earth, with kindly thirst updrawn, rose a fresh fountain, and with many a rill watered the garden, thence united fell down the steep glade, and met the never flood, which from this darksome passage now appears, and now divided into four streams, runs diverse, wandering many a famous realm, and country, whereof here needs no account, but rather to tell how, if art could tell, how from that sapphire fount the crisp brooks, rolling on orient pearl and sands of gold, with mazy error under pendant shades, ran nectar, visiting each plant and fed, flowers worthy of paradise, which not nice art, in beds and curious knots, but nature boon, poured forth, profuse on hill, and dale and plain, both where the morning sun first warmly smote the open field, and where the unpierced shade embrowned the noontide bowers. Thus was this place, a happy rural seat of various view. This is just a taste of how Earth is imagined in its pre-fall state in Paradise Lost. There is a richness both in ideas and the composition of the verses. Portraying the world before the fall in such a sublime and beautiful fashion is no mean feat, especially as doing so would be a challenging task for any artist or creator. The depiction of Satan. Satan is arguably the protagonist of the story. Emphasis on protagonist. Like Macbeth, who is also the protagonist of his story, he is not the hero, but instead the villain. The hero of Paradise Lost is Christ, who appears often throughout the epic. Although he is never called Christ, he is instead called the Son. Satan is a wicked character and a skillful rhetorician. In books 5 to 6, his angelic name is revealed to have been Lucifer originally, and Adam is told by the angel Raphael that he was a magnificent archangel before he persuaded a third of heaven to join his rebellion. The motive behind Lucifer's rebellion is explained as envy caused by pride. After seeing God the Father honor and declare his Son to be Messiah King, Lucifer decides he wants equality with the Godhead. He gathers his legions and appeals to the pride of those assembled, and sells them on the notions of liberty from, and equality with, God. Thrones, denominations, princedoms, virtues, powers. If these magnific titles yet remain, not merely titular, since by decree another now hath to himself engrossed all power, and us eclipsed under the name of King Anointed, from whom all this haste of midnight march and hurried meeting here. This only to consult how we may best, with what may be devised of honours new, receive him coming to receive from us knee tribute yet unpaid, prostration vile, too much to one, but double how endured, to one, and to his image now proclaimed. But what if better counsels might erect our minds, and teach us to cast off this yoke? Will ye submit your necks, and choose to bend the supple knee? Ye will not, if I trust, to know ye right, or if ye know yourselves, natives and sons of heaven possessed before, by none, and if not equal all, yet free, equally free, for orders and degrees, jar not with liberty, but well consist. Who can in reason then, or right assume, monarchy over such as live by right, his equals, if in power and splendour less, in freedom equal, or can introduce law and edict on us, who, without law, err not, much less for this to be our lord, and look for adoration to the abuse of those imperial titles, which assert our being ordained to govern, not to serve. A Sarif called Abziel argues back against Satan and calls him out on these points. O argument blasphemous, false and proud, words which no ear ever to hear in heaven, expected, least of all from thee, ingrate, in place, thyself so high above thy peers, canst thou with impious obloquy condemn the just decree of God, pronounced and sworn, that to his only Son, by right endued, with regal sceptre, every soul in heaven shall bend the knee, and in that honour due, confess him rightful King. Unjust, thou sayest, flatly unjust, to bind with laws the free, and equal over equals to let reign, one over all with unsucceeded power. Shalt thou give law to God? Shalt thou dispute with him the points of liberty, who made thee what thou art, and formed the powers of heaven, such as he pleased and circumscribed their being? Yet, by experience taught, we know how good, and of our good and of our dignity, how provident he is, how far from thought to make us less, bent rather to exalt our happy state under one head more near, united, but to grant it thee unjust, that equal over equals monarch reign. Thyself, though great and glorious, dost thou count, or all angelic nature joined in one, equal to him begotten Son, by whom, as by his word the mighty Father made all things, even thee, and all the spirits of heaven, by him created in their bright degrees, crowned them with glory, and to their glory named thrones, denominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, essential powers, nor by his reign obscured, but more illustrious made, since he the head, one of our number, thus reduced becomes. His laws are laws, all honour to him done, returns our own. Cease then this impious rage, and tempt not these, but hasten to appease the incensed father and the incensed son, while pardon may be found in time besought. And Satan responds thus: That we were formed, then sayest thou, and the work of secondary hands by task transferred from father to his son, strange point and new, doctrine which we would know whence learned. Who saw when this creation was? Rememberest thou thy making, while the Maker gave thee being? We know no time when we were not as now, no none before us, self-begot, self-raised, by our own quickening power, when fatal course had circled his full orb, the birth mature of this our native heaven, ethereal sons. Our puissance is our own right hand, shall teach us highest deeds, by proof to try, who is our equal. Then thou shalt behold, whether by supplication we intend address, and to begirt the almighty throne, beseeching or besieging. This report, these tidings carry to the anointed king, and fly, ere evil intercept thy flight. In these pages and more, Milton depicts Satan as a proud deceiver who uses honeyed words and appeals to grand and seductive ideas to seduce his listeners into following his will. In particular, he appeals to pride in order to make others do as he pleases. While he speaks of equality with God and argues that they shouldn't have to obey God, he positions himself as a leader above the rest of his followers, and so exalts himself above God. Or in other words, he persuades a third of the angels to stop serving God and to serve him instead, and appeals to liberty and equality to reach this end. No real state of equality or liberty is actually achieved, because Satan simply makes himself a king over the angels he influences. Thus, Satan is portrayed as a deceitful leader with ulterior motives, rather than a true believer in equality and liberty. As stated previously, he is also portrayed as a master of rhetoric. Book 1 takes place in Hell, and even though everyone is there because of Satan and his actions, the fallen archangel still manages to persuade the fallen angels that it wasn't his fault really. Who could have known that they would lose the war, he asks in so many words, and actually argues it is a better fate to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Is this the region? This the soil, the clime? Said then the lost archangel. This the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he, who is now sovereign, can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best, whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy field, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell. Receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same? And what should I be? All but less than he, whom thunder hath made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and, in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we, then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call them not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more, with rallied arms, to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more, lost in hell. At the end of Book 2, he decides to go to Earth to ruin mankind and God's world. This is a decision he makes, not because he thinks he can defeat the Godhead, but simply because he wants to frustrate God's plans as much as possible, and inflict as much pain and suffering on his enemies as he can. It is my opinion that all the characters are well crafted and written in Paradise Lost, but Satan as the protagonist sees the most development. Milton avoids the trap of portraying Satan as a gross and vile caricature, which we are all familiar with from stereotypical depictions of demons and devils in art. Satan is spiteful, prideful, and evil. Paradise Lost does not leave the reader in doubt on these points, but he is also a brilliant rhetorician, a cunning deceiver, and a natural leader. We never see what Lucifer was like before he decided to rebel against God, but even as Satan, there are echoes of what he was before he fell, and he is almost a tragic figure. Now, comparisons are often made between Lucifer and Prometheus. I feel it necessary to stress that in Paradise Lost and the Bible, Satan is not a Promethean figure because their motives are completely different. After Zeus takes fire away from mankind because of a trick played by Prometheus, the Titan steals fire from Zeus and gives it back to man, and, depending on the version of the myth and the reading, he does this to repair the damage he caused and out of pity for mankind. Satan, on the other hand, deceives mankind because he wants to spite God and bring death to his creation, and he is causing damage rather than repairing it. Noble intentions and motivations can be found in Prometheus, but they cannot be found in Satan. The beauty and style of the verse. I've been efficient here, and have already provided readings from the book to demonstrate the beautiful and sometimes profound nature of the epic poem, so I only need to add a few more words here. Paradise Lost is simultaneously a biblical, speculative, mythical, symbolic, metaphorical, poetic, and theological work. It is a masterpiece, and the threads and themes are weaved so seamlessly that it can sometimes be difficult to analyse what is going on in detail and discern the meaning of certain passages. Milton was aware that he was writing about major cosmological events and concepts which theologians, among others, have debated for centuries, and that some matters and mysteries cannot be properly comprehended by the human mind. In books 5 to 6, Raphael tells Adam and Eve about the war in heaven, but says he is going to describe it in a manner that they'll be able to understand. The way the conflict is represented in Paradise Lost is not meant to be understood literally. For instance, shields, spears, and swords are mentioned, but they are likely only described to help Adam understand the terrible spectacle and awful nature of the fighting. But I think this disclaimer by Raphael applies to other parts of the poem as well. For instance, in Book 2, we meet Sin and Death, guarding the gates of hell, and Satan needs to persuade them to let him leave. Sin is depicted as an evil female being brought into existence by Satan when he decided to lead his rebellion against God. She tells Satan that when she originally appeared to him in heaven, she was comely and beautiful, and that he had his way with her at that time. The result of that union was death, a vile and powerful monster. At different times during her addresses to Satan, Sin calls Satan her father, describes their act of union as rape, and tells him that Death is his son. I do not think Milton believed that Satan was a literal father, or that Sin was a female being, or that Death was a literal son of both Satan and Sin. Rather, I think this part of the poem is meant to be metaphorical, and is meant to stress the vile, perverted, and unnatural nature and consequences of Satan's transgressions. The point being brought across is that sin exists because of Satan's actions, and death exists because of sin. Hence, there is a direct lineage from Satan to sin to death. By using the metaphors of familial relations, Milton is able to dramatise and stress these connections, and also show how vile sin is, how interactions with sin are perverted and unnatural, and how the consequences of doing so are terrible to behold. Hopefully what I've said will have given everyone a fair and succinct understanding of what Paradise Lost is like and what it is about. For those who have watched this video to the end, firstly, thank you, and are now interested in reading the book, I feel obliged to give a heads up. Because Paradise Lost was written hundreds of years ago, some of the words and their meanings have changed. So in the poem, the adjective gay does not mean homosexual, but will either mean happy or colourful. This is just one example of the linguistic divide between the early modern English of Paradise Lost and present-day modern English. There are also many obscure words, derived from Greek and Latin, which you will need a dictionary to learn the meanings of. There are also archaic English words, verbal tense conjugations, and other such examples of early modern English forms which are also found in Shakespeare's work. As long as you are prepared for these, reading the book should be a joy. Ladies and gentlemen, that is enough from me. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have an excellent St. George's Day.